go on to Jonathan's talk. Thanks again, Eric. And if anyone has a question for Eric, just chat it out. So Jonathan is a coworker of mine and Gabe as well. We all work at the company Clever, which is an Oklahoma City-based company physically, but Jonathan's based out of the Tulsa area. We are very remote right now, so repping the Tulsa side for sure. And Jonathan's been working on a lot of cool stuff at Clever. He's been there for a little over a year or so now. And today's talk is something that he's going to talk about that I'm really interested in over rule books or rules engines. I'm sure he's going to get more into that. I have used them in the past at one company I worked at, and they were really cool. And I'm sure that's probably just one way to use them. I'm excited to hear today. So without further ado, Jonathan, you have the stage.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm excited to be here. Again, my name is Jonathan Roach, and I will be talking about rules engines. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay. Okay. So yeah, again, I'll be talking about rules engines, when, where, why, and how. Rules engines really sounds like a pretty complex term. It sounds like a scary term. And so hopefully I can kind of demystify some of the concepts and how we might be able to use those in our applications. A little bit about me. My name is Jonathan Roach. I'm a software engineer at Clever. I've been doing PHP and JavaScript development for a bit since the early 2000s. It's been a great ride. I've got a little bit of design experience from a long time ago in a previous life. So I like to use those design skills with my development and try to make things better. So first, what is a rules engine, which might be probably the first thing you might ask yourself if you're looking down at using something like that. Basically, rules engines allow us to externalize our if statements that we would normally write within our application. They let us run evaluations at runtime for business rules that we might have. I've looked at some of the history that I think they trace back to the early 90s with particular CRM, data analytics, and supply chain industries, companies like Fair Isaac and IBM, things like that. So very corporate, very, where businesses have lots of workflows that have tons of conditions that need to be evaluated. So the next is when would you want to consider a rules engine in your application stack or group of applications? When the rules tend to change frequently, if you're getting lots of calls from your clients or customers to change rules that are baked into your application, when updating that logic becomes a bottleneck for the business, if you've got even a 24-hour turnaround for a business rule change, that might not be fast enough for your customers. When the rules experts need control of the workflows, a lot of times, your client knows the rules better than you as a developer might know them. So they've got a pretty good handle on what needs to happen, things like that. So if you've got someone on your client side that has that type of command and they do want that kind of control, it's a good opportunity to think about a rules engine for that. And last, if the complexity is high, if you've got a lot of complexity in your application, a rules engine is likely a good candidate. Where would I put a rules engine now that I've decided that I do want to do one? There's a lot of different ways. We can even bake something into our app itself. We can do an installable plugin. An example I will show here in a bit is a plugin that installs into a popular framework. We could even use an external service, and so we can use a SaaS where we pay for a really complex service that takes care of a lot of stuff for us. And usually those will have really nice UIs that allow our customers to build out their own kind of UI rules and things like that. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so why would I want to use a rules engine? You can really reduce the workload of a dev team think about all the calls that you might be getting to change simple things, you can be developing features instead of doing those simple conditional changes. This reduces the life cycle of deploying rule changes. If a rule change does need to be made, you're not looking at an entire build process of testing and things like that. It does give us the opportunity to centralize those rules. So if we have lots of apps in the wild for one corporation, that corporation has a single set of rules, we can centralize those rules in one location, maybe a service or something like that, and have those apps use that service as their source of truth. Also, it allows us to empower our customers. It's always a good thing to make our customers feel empowered that we're contributing to their success. So giving them a little bit of power in their own business is always a good thing. Next, how. There's lots of ways we can execute this. What we're looking for, though, is we're maybe provide text-based configuration with INI files, XML files, or JSON. We want to give our customers access to those configs if we're using configurations. In the engine itself, we need the ability to evaluate text as expressions. We'll show how we're doing that with Symfony expression language. And then we want to supply actions for those evaluations. If we're evaluating a condition, we want to have some way to tell the engine what to do. And lastly, a UI rules builder and manager is a really great thing to consider when we are maturing our rules engine. We might start with something really simple with a text-based configuration, and then later on down the road, provide our customers with a really full-featured suite of boxes and arrows where they can put their own rules together, and everything kind of really makes sense and works well for them. So I'll do a simple demo with PHP, Symfony expression language, and Laravel. I'm going to switch over to my code editor. And I'm going to forget how to do this. Hopefully this text is big enough. But I'll go through a simple story. I created a fictitious bike shop. The bike shop is not very good at deciding what to do with their rules engines, which is why we have this really simple example here of let's troll our users. Now, what we want to do is my, as a developer, favorite magician's name is Dynamo. So if anybody puts their name as Dynamo when they sign up, I want to add the magnificent afterwards. So I've got the typical way we might do that in our code. So I create a user here, and then I've got a simple if statement. If the user's name is Dynamo, take the user's name and add the magnificent after it and save it. And so what you would find is Dynamo would put his name in, and after he saved his account and went back in, he would see the magnificent at the end of his name, and hopefully he would be perturbed, because that's what we're trying to do. Now, if we were trying to do this with a rules engine, so what we're seeing here is a configuration API that I've created on top of the rules engine that we have. But three things to consider with rules engines are the fact. These are just kind of rules engine terminologies. Fact would be the model that you want your rules engine to look at. Then we give our rules engine a condition, and then we can give our rules engine an action to run if that condition evaluates to true. So here I have my condition here. The terminology, again, is fact for the rules engine, but imagine fact being user. So the username equals Dynamo. I have some logic here telling the rules engine that any number of conditions that I pass here, I need all of those to evaluate to true before I want to run the actions. And then I have an action defined just as a closure here. And it does the same thing we saw up here in the typical example, where username, and let's append the magnificent to it. And so let's do a quick demo of that. I'm going to pop over to my terminal screen here, and let's create a user. I am in Laravel CLI. Okay. Command is just going to give me a fake user. So my user's name is Garrett Shanahan. I'm going to change that to Dynamo. Okay, and then after I save this, okay, I will hop over to my database. So here we go. I already had a previous example here, but I have Dynamo the Magnificent has been added to this user's name. Let's pull it back up in the CLI tool and make sure that that comes through. So my user equals find the user with the ID of 8, which is my newly created user. And now we have Dynamo the Magnificent. And hopefully Dynamo is now perturbed. So that's a simple example of how we could use rules engines. More real world cases could be the consideration of a shopping cart. Let's say we want to provide a discount to users who've bought more than 5 items in a month. Pretty complex set of conditions, but we can use a rules engine to give it those types of conditions to evaluate. And then maybe your fact would be the cart itself, and you would maybe apply a discount to the final price that the user has to pay. So that's one example. Let's see here. That's the gist of kind of demonstrating this. I can look at the code, but it's pretty complex, and I just really wanted to kind of show the outer layer of what we would interface with for a text-based configuration. I think kind of next steps for me as I go through this journey are to look at what a user interface might look like for this. This kind of works for technically savvy people like webmasters, if you think about that role. But for my customer, they're likely going to want something visual to kind of update. So that's a little bit of the looking forward things that we've got going on for this particular thing. So that's all I have for rules engines. Hopefully that was informative, and so I'll hand the screen back.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. Everyone give Jonathan your respective round of applause in whatever room you are in. We do have one question that came up throughout the talk, and I'll also encourage anyone else to ask questions too while we're going over this one. This may have been in context of at the moment. This was asked a little bit early on, but the question was, are these business run feature toggles? So my thought there is, can you kind of toggle these on and off, or we're kind of segueing even into like what you were talking about, the business logic? Could it be toggled by something outside of the scope of this code?
That's interesting. Think about it. I think what the goal of the business rules setup would be is that maybe the business toggle itself could be kind of a condition in your rules engine. So I would imagine you could include that as one of the conditions. So, and then maybe have some cascading rules that would run under that. I think as I've thought a little bit about that, you might be able to have different configurations per company. Let's say if you've got a multi-tenant situation, I would imagine you could have maybe company A configuration, company B configuration, and then have your runtime kind of evaluate it in that way. Hopefully awesome. That answered that question. So.
Yeah, and that was from Copy Commando, so thank you for asking that. And I'll comment too. So I've worked on rules engines just once before in the past. This was back in 2011 to 2013 or so. So we're talking, a good decade ago now. And I remember, I don't know if this is how a general rules engine works, but I remember one of the things with rules engines were that whatever rules you applied to your process, you couldn't, at least for the way we had it, we couldn't guarantee the order that those rules ran. Is that pretty accurate?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, and that's really the way the rules engines are. The intent behind it is I should be able to. It's kind of a pure function kind of idea. You give the rules engine your fact, and no matter what order those run in, you should expect the same result. So.
Yeah, and I remember the way that we used it at the company I was with at the time. It was internal product, and it was a very workflow-based product. You know, a business process started here, and then another process started another process, and we had an application at work that allowed people to like assign tasks to each other, and it was very queue-based. So what the rules engine was really good at doing was whenever we had one process finish, a rule would fire, or a series of rules would fire to create the new tasks that then segmented off like the next step of the process. So
yeah, that's cool.
if I finished my work, that would then create the task to allow John and Gabe and anyone else to kind of complete their work. And the order didn't matter there. So it took me a second to like logically work it in my head how it worked, but it was a very powerful tool.
Yeah, that's really cool. That makes me think about another thing. There's two kind of design directions, or two different types of evaluation that you can do with rules engines. One is more active. The other is more passive. So what we saw was a more, I guess imperative might be the better way to say it. We've given the rules engine an object. The rules engine does something with that object and gives it back to you. You've got other designs where the rules engine is more active in reacting to situations. So let's say, a user has been with your store for a year, and you want to send them a happy anniversary email. Something more active in a rules engine would be appropriate for that. So there's a couple of different ways to execute that.
Well, perfect. If anyone has any questions, feel free to chat them out in the Slack in the Twitch channel, or in Slack as well. Jonathan is on the Techlahoma Slack. Yeah. So thanks again, Jonathan. That was an awesome talk.